It was here, on Fairway Road, that I had my first encounter with John Lingwood. In 1970, John E. Motes, publisher of the Kitchener-Waterloo Record, commissioned John Lingwood to design a new building for the newspaper, and when I walked through the Record's doors 10 years later, I was struck with the kind of awe that one might feel when they walk into a cathedral. I'd come from small-town newspapers where broom closets doubled as dark rooms and journalists sat shoulder to shoulder with advertising sales staff. Over the next 25 years, I would come to know every square foot of that building. The echo of the stairwells, the clunk of the freight elevator, the communal clatter of keyboards, and the rumble of the presses.
My dad was one of these people who, if he cottoned on to someone, then he committed to that person. So whether it was the guy selling him a car or whether it was the guy that was building a building for him, if he trusted you, you owned him. And so John Lingwood was definitely in that camp. I knew him first as somebody that built my dad's home in the mid-60s. And he was a little bit larger than life because he had already had a string of successes in the community. I knew him more as the guy that built tons and tons of schools.
Urban renewal and planning was really big. Rapid growth was kind of a mantra of the community for some reason, even the newspaper to some degree. The expressway was being planned. The city hall was demolished. The Oxley Tower, which is only 12 stories high, was built. I mean, that was kind of the mood. Going into 73, which is when the Record moved from downtown.
The city wanted to build a parking garage downtown. And the parking garage was going to eliminate our parking lot. So the Record property was essentially at the corner of Queen and Duke Street, and then it went all the way back to Ontario Street on Duke, and then down to Gowdy's Lane. So it was let's make a deal time with the city, and a German brewery who was going to move to town and build a large brewery out in the hinterland on Block Line Road.
Jobs, and guess what? Beer. Perfect for Kitchener-Waterloo. And that, for some reason, fell apart, and the property became available.
I don't know the details, but it was essentially, okay, you give us your downtown parking lot, we'll give you all this acreage out on Fairway Road, but you got to use it. You got to start building sooner than later.
And the Record moved to Fairway Road.
It was really the middle of nowhere. People were very complimentary, thought we were being bold by moving so far out of town. Everybody understood that this was the place to be, even if it seemed not to be at the moment. Our vision was pretty clear to everybody who cared to look at it.
When I think back about it, and I was involved in the move, and I became editor very quickly after, to my surprise, to my shock, actually. When I think about it, I think it was a statement of position and strength.
I think it had the good look. I mean, there's certainly nothing about it that was wimpy and suggested we weren't anything but a force to be reckoned with in the community, that's for sure. It was a fascinating looking building that I think made an appropriate statement for the day and just screamed the year it was built.
It just seemed like a good move, a big step up. And I think that created another generation of energy. But you kind of sensed that there was going to be change ahead.
My first kind of big job after being there a year or two was doing the interior and then looking after the move. We came at the business from the angle that this is a public utility. So we are as much a public company as a private company. Okay, we have a responsibility to the community, and we create expectations in our readers and advertisers that we need to meet. And so when it came to building a building, it's about trying to reflect those sorts of values. The front lobby, there was a commitment to local materials there. And so all the ceramic tile, the very rich ceramic tiles were all local stuff, and all the millwork and all that was done locally. All the desks and chairs were all made locally. I mean, not that there was any shortage of companies that made office furniture and would do custom millwork. You had everything in town, okay? There was simply no need to go out. Everybody made everything locally. Even our boilers were made in Galt. But it was just because the best boilers were made in Galt. The best ceramic tile were made in Elmira and Waterloo. There wasn't any better anywhere.
Over time, people would say that it was an iconic building. I'm not sure that was in anybody's mind at the time, that it would be an iconic building. It certainly was. I mean, once it was there, you could not miss it.
I had known the building from my trips from my hometown of Stratford to Toronto when I was going to university, and then farther afield back to Kingston when I would come back home to visit my parents. So I had this image of driving past it and seeing this large fortress-like building. You certainly got a sense of strength from that building from looking at it from the outside. Maybe people felt that we were there, the watchdog of the community, and we were strong like that building.
But the sense of strength was also the people inside, the people who worked there, who did their jobs there, who were proud, committed, dedicated folks to what they were doing, and the end result is the content. If the building has an effect on the content that's positive, which it did, then that building did what it was supposed to do. Tours of the place, those were part of my responsibility as well. So we had lots of people come through the place, people who were excited by the building, readers, subscribers, advertisers, who actually took time out of their lives to walk through that building, to see how it worked, to see the inner sanctum of the record, or at that time, the Kitchener-Waterloo record. And thousands of people went through the place to look at the press, to kind of peer at the newsroom, because there were so many gods in there, you didn't want to interfere with their work.
By the 1990s, the golden days of newspapering were beginning to tarnish. Readership was declining. Advertising dollars were beginning to drift away to other media. By 1996, when the Record first launched its website, it was clear the game had changed. Bricks and mortar no longer held their once symbolic value. Seeking efficiencies, media companies began to consolidate operations at central sites. Before long, printing the daily newspaper was moved to Torstar's suburban Toronto printing plant, and the rumble of the presses could no longer be heard at 225 Fairway Road.
As the corporate people took over, and there was such a revolving door of ownership and whatnot, for me personally, the building became less and less important. I don't want this to sound nasty or anything, but I got the impression of a couple of visits I had with what some companies would call the facilities managers or real estate section of a large company, which, let's just put this up for sale, sell the whole damn building. We'll make $12 million. You guys find somewhere else to live, and we go home and we get a bonus. And then I kind of moved on.
Torstar itself wasn't thinking long-term that it wanted to own real estate. Torstar wanted to focus on its core competency, which is media and delivering messages and selling audiences to advertisers. owning a big building that was really 3/4 empty because the presses were gone, and distribution services, putting together the flyer packages and the weekend packages, had moved to a separate facility on Bleems Road. The place was cavernous. You could hear crickets in part of the buildings, and it was affecting morale because it was dowdy and the carpets were worn out. It was a bit of a jumble. We realized that there were financial reasons, strategic reasons, productivity reasons, and big corporate sort of capital and financing reasons to deal with the building for once and for all. And so I started a project in about 2002-03 to solve the building problem.
The place was reeking in subtlety and misfortune. The idea that 6 months after the building was built, asbestos was outlawed as a building material. So we just missed. Within a year, the code changed about insulation and vapor barriers and how windows were done and stuff. And, so we missed a lot of stuff. Heating, cooling systems had to be modified over the years rather extensively to be brought up to date, because we just missed on some of that stuff. But that happens. I was young, I was an insider, all these things, and I'm the guy who had to look after the problems they created. So that's a little bit heavy in my head. I've worked hard not to be sentimental about it, or else, I could be quite a mess at an interview like this.
Moving day is always a day of mixed emotions, whether it's in your own life or in a workplace. There are memories associated with the building, and those who had spent, big part of their career, 20, 30 years in the record building, there were some tears and thinking, oh gosh, I'm leaving behind this house that housed so many of my career memories, my workplace memories, people I've worked with, happy memories. So, there's a certain sadness about that. But as for me, I was doing a jig and clicking my heels and jumping in the air because my office was filled with flies. Like, flies were living up in, there was an infestation of bugs in my office. And we'd put such a labor of love into creating a new newsroom and a new circulation and advertising production departments that were beautiful, new furniture, but carrying all that history. I couldn't wait to be living out my job life in the new place, and couldn't wait to get out of the old place myself. So I didn't shed a tear, but I could see people around me being very sentimental, and I respected that and I understood that. It
so happened that I was on the back ring road of the building during the demolition, when the excavator reached in and removed my father's office. There was no need, because of the type of demolition they were doing, I guess, to remove the carpet or even the drapes. And so I watched a mechanical arm reach in and grab whatever it could and haul it out, and it was that office.
It's quite a journey, actually.
So is this where my quest to find John Lingwood ends? With the demolition of a building that shaped my life? Surely there's more. The Lingwood office completed over 700 projects over the 36 years it was in business. If you attended school, went to a worship service, entered a civic building after 1955, chances are you were touched by John Lingwood's work. His was among a handful of architectural firms of the era that created a rich stock of modernist buildings in Waterloo region. So let's go back to the beginning and find out what shaped John Lingwood. Here we are, 1955 at the corner of King and Queen Streets in downtown Kitchener. In an audacious move, John Lingwood, 32 years old, has uprooted his family in Detroit and moved to Kitchener to open his architectural practice on the top floor of this building. He married Betty Cameron 9 years earlier in a double ceremony with Betty's sister Phyllis and Roy Youngson at Westminster United Church in Winnipeg. John was in his second year at the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Manitoba. He graduated in 1949 and went to work in Detroit as a draftsman. And by the time he headed to Kitchener 6 years later, he and Betty had 3 children, Linda, Wendy, and Cameron. The youngest, Lisa, would arrive later. These are the post-World War II years. Waterloo County is emerging as a manufacturing center. Highway 401 is pushing westward from Toronto. Schools, churches, civic buildings, universities, and family homes are rising from the farmlands of Waterloo County. It was a time of great optimism and opportunity, not unlike the current economic environment in downtown Kitchener.
And I'm not for a minute suggesting that we could reproduce the conditions that existed in 1955, where you have this sort of highly diversified manufacturing, small industrial economy operating in Waterloo region, which is producing basically everything you need to make a building. That doesn't exist anymore, and it doesn't exist anywhere. Modernism in Waterloo region, it seems to me, is a generational thing. It appears with the generation of young architects who are educated, University of Toronto, University of Manitoba, in the period after the Second World War. They've been schooled in modern approaches to design, modern style, and their approach is accepted, obviously accepted in our area, and perhaps accepted more readily than it was in other areas of the country. One of the genesis of modern architecture is industrial. The beauty, the monumentality, the abstraction, the constructive logic of these great industrial buildings, these are the exact characteristics that modern architects believed they were replicating in their architecture. So buildings that were done here in the first couple of decades after the Second World War are not unambitious buildings. You know, there are all kinds of ideas that are embodied in these buildings. They're not merely practical, but they are practical. And they're practical in ways that are that go beyond simply being the minimum required.
When John Lingwood moved his young family back to Canada in 1955 to open his practice in Kitchener, John, his wife Betty, and 3 children shared a 2-bedroom apartment with John's mother-in-law for 2 years before moving to a townhouse on Sherwood Avenue. With business booming, the Lingwoods really needed a place to call home, and that's when John connected with another young businessman, homebuilder Harold Freur, and together they built the first 20 family homes here on Manchester Road.
John was just starting in practice, and it was our early days in building. I had bought the lots from River Road down 20 houses, and that was the end of the street in those days. And I thought, what am I going to do with those lots now? They were across the road from the park. I went to John. I said, John, I want to build something, but let's think out of the box. I left it up to John. I said, here's the square footage we need. John designed 2 or 3 different modeled houses, and we built them. They were ahead of their time. They weren't easy to sell, but we did sell them. They were different on the exterior, and different windows. If you look at some of those houses today, they had the long, narrow brick, which John liked. We brought in a lot of that brick from the States. It wasn't available here, but he was always looking for different materials. John liked the projects where he was in control. He could design it, and what he decided was accepted, and that's where he built it. John moved into one, we moved into one, and we were there for many years, neighbors. John was there for most of his working life, and we became friends, close friends. Those days, we didn't know the difference between work and play. We would meet on Saturdays, Sundays, anytime, and we had fun working together.
I remember lying in my room and listening to birdsong. It starts early, and there's just so much of it. And I'm listening to it right now as we're here. It's just the area is alive with birds, and it's just very green.
Oh, you got it. Okay, now you come back. I think living here, I've come to appreciate how John Lingwood was not only designing houses that were quite innovative for the time in the mid-1950s, but how he was able to put it into a natural setting so that it all worked.
Manchester was full of kids, all my age, the baby boomers. Every house had 3 or 4 or 5 kids in it. You know, growing up there was just great. We had total freedom. We played in everybody else's backyards, and nobody knew it or cared. So as a kid, I could go play in Cam Lingwood's backyard or the Anglert's backyard.
But that was the best place in town to raise a kid, because there was a bush, not a park, but there was porcupines, there was raccoons. We'd go in there and have bonfires, and the cops didn't bug us.
But yes, it was a nice place to live, because across the street there was a park, and always remained a park. The house was small, although when you're a child, you don't think of it as being small. But Lisa was born there, so we had 4 children in a 3-bedroom home with 1 bathroom and a half bath downstairs until my father added on to it. But that was years later.
All the kids that were in my class who came in the house just thought it was great. And I'd often get them, they would say, "Oh, you have the richest house on the street." And back then, I didn't care, it was a house. But if I brought friends in, they'd go, "Wow, this place is fantastic."
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Lisa. Good to see you, Masha. Nice to see you. Yes, nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Yeah. Nice to see you. It's gonna be hard for you a little bit.
I hardly recognize the house. Just everything just looks so different. It's really
glad
pretty.
to see you. The fence is brand new.
Yeah, that's
few
what
years
I
ago.
wondered. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was very old.
Yeah, it was old. Yeah.
And you remember here was the apple tree.
Yes. Yes.
We removed it because the apple tree was very sick.
Oh, it was.
And then, we have to remove it.
Yeah.
Come inside.
Okay.
Come inside. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow. Wow, that's amazing.
But I'm pretty sure this is the original.
It might be. The original design that my dad had was just a plain 3-bedroom, 2-story. He took that all apart and built this huge room. We used to call it the Great Room. And he had a huge stone fireplace put in, just beautiful. It changed the whole house, basically.
If you look at some of John's projects, some of his projects, you'll see where he used features of that stone, what we called field stone.
And I drive a lot of times because I love that street.
Yeah.
Then I saw the sign for sale. I told right away to my agent, and I said, I am gonna buy this house. It was messy. Yeah, it was messy.
Yeah.
It was dirty.
My brother said.
And my friends said, Basha, what are you doing? Are you not that
have a brand new house, everything new. That was my idea, to keep everything to open. I living here 15 years, but every day I say I love my house.
That's yeah.
This is the biggest gift in Canada what I got.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's sweet, honey. Oh.
Summertime it's really nice because there is pattern of stones, like little patio, and that lights up.
Actually, I had my wedding reception here, and we had all our photographs taken in the park. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we didn't have a very big wedding. Probably 30, 35. My parents at the time weren't that financially off. My dad was having a bit of a hard time with finances and stuff. So I had my sister's wedding dress because I couldn't afford to buy a new one. And this was all lace, and she had the lace sleeves and the light lace bodice. And the only thing that wasn't hers was I bought the hat. I didn't want to wear a veil, so I just bought a hat. So.
You always knew he loved you, never told you, but was always there for us. When I went away to school, my dad, he would send me cards. He would send me a funny card, which I think I've kept over the years, most of them. But yeah, he always wanted you to know that he was thinking about you.
Talented, caring, conscientious, artistic, and he couldn't have been a better man for me, for my father. I mean, he was just always, worrying and paid a lot of attention to his kids.
I spent a lot of time with my dad, at the cottage especially. We really got along. He used to always take me to all the building sites. When I was 5 or 6 years old, on a Saturday or a Sunday, he'd come on, let's go. And I'd go through all these buildings, and I watched them be built, like not during the process, but I could see the different stages, and he built some big houses. I went to all those houses, and I saw them being built. And I was just fascinated, and I was so proud of him too, that he could build this stuff.
Yeah, he was a good guy. He was exceptional in the social scene, like parties and whatever. I mean, and I know friends of mine have told me this, that when my mom and dad came, everyone would kind of sit back, because my father was very handsome, especially when he was younger. And then my mother, and the two of them just looked like movie stars. My mother and I did never hit it off. But I give her credit as far as helping his career, because she was a great hostess, not a great mother, but she did a good job. And I mean, all the entertaining that they did, I'm sure, helped. But my mother was really beautiful, and that was her life. She just was all about Betty. When we started having children, she could not handle the fact that she was a grandmother, and she didn't let the children call her grandmother. They had to call her Maggie.
My mom was one of those people that should have had kids. When my dad died, I was devastated. Like, it took me months to get over it. Mom died about 6 months later. She was in a nursing home and she had Alzheimer's. We had a cottage up in Georgian Bay when we were growing up, and haven't seen it for quite a while, but it was a gorgeous design. He designed it and built it. He built right over some rock, so that when you walked into the bathroom, you could see rock going up to the base of the cottage. It was about a 2-hour drive from Kitchener, maybe a little more. And I have very fond memories of being in the back seat of the car with my brother and my dad smoking in the front. And so we're all trying to get him to open the window. But the memories that I have are Cam and I wanted to stop at Dairy Queen halfway through up to the cottage.
There's the DQ.
So we were always kind of nagging him because he just wanted to get there. And we were always nagging at him to please stop so we can get a milkshake. And he always gave in. He always gave in. So that's one fond memory I have of going to the cottage. It was not too far a drive in the boat. We had a fairly large boat. And it was a kind of a long walk from the dock to the cottage.
That's it, hon, right?
One with the flag. Yeah.
Very much the same.
Mm-hmm. I noticed the water level is really high. When my dad was building the cottage, we had all 4 kids up there. I was very young at the time that he was building it. My grandmother was always there, and I had to wear a life jacket in case I fell into the water because I didn't know how to swim.
Whitney Bradley, who has a cottage right beside where ours was a good friend of my dad's, said, come and look at this piece of property. So we drove over or went by boat, and I think that's when my dad fell in love with this property.
The cottage is what gave us the companionship we ended up with, because I was with him all the time. It was just up there, was just too gorgeous to believe for a kid.
His ultimate goal was to have a really, really nice beach.
And he wanted a beach that the little kids could play on without worrying about snakes, and so he had it all bulldozed out, and it was beautiful.
My dad just loved going down there, weeding, pulling out the grass, raking the sand, and
yeah, he was the happiest when he was up there.
Oh my God. It's all different.
Oh, yeah. Like they put a pantry in the kitchen in there.
I wouldn't recognize it at all.
That was, they took out that wall.
They took out the wall. That's what Rita was talking
oh, he had a wicked sense of humor.
Okay, so there was this sailboat that used to come in, and my father didn't like it because they would stay out in the bay. So my father gets this gorilla suit, and then he gets Billy to take him out in the canoe, probably so no one would hear him, and then starts peering in all these windows. And then what did he do? He went and hung on the
he
buoy?
went and got on one of the great big buoys in his gorilla suit, watching boaters go by. And
so he's just in the middle of nowhere because it was on the way to Perry Sound, hanging onto this buoy in this gorilla suit.
He was just really good with us kids. I mean, he was just he'd crack jokes when we'd go out for dinner. And
I think he built the outhouse before he even built the first part of the cottage.
This is what I've really been waiting for.
Yeah.
When we were tenting, or you need somewhere to go.
That was actually pretty famous in those days. It was a pretty conservative area, and people thought, what's that? That can't be an outhouse.
Oh, wow. I thought about that painting.
It's hilarious. Yeah, the seats are still there.
Yeah.
Needs a new floor.
Isn't hers.
His and hers seats, yeah.
Nice view of the lake.
That's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Wow, gee.
I love the pie.
Yeah. Nice kitchen. Yeah, real improvement. Yeah, this whole wall, there used to be a wall all the way down here.
Yeah.
And this was more of a porch area. It was all screened in. And this is this is the main living room here. But I think I had a different reaction than I thought I would. I wasn't expecting it to look this different. I don't know. This has all been modernized. Like this is more like a home, not like a cottage. And I know my dad's intent really was to intend it to look like a cottage. Yeah, it just brings a whole lot of memories back. I mean, it's incredible. Just watching the water and the trees, and it's wonderful. I mean, I really miss it. I must say I really miss it. But it was totally impractical for us to keep it after my dad died.
There's no one thing that makes a space inherently sacred. There's something about us as humans that long for primary experience that stone and light and wood draws forth. As communities gather in churches, for example, as they sing together, as they pray together, as they worship, then the space begins to be filled with or permeated with the memories of what the community does here.
Carmel New Church is one of the most extraordinary pieces of modern architecture, not only in the region but in the country. I think it is a hugely underappreciated work. It's a fairly early work of the Lingwood office. And to be honest, I think it is of such excellence that it simply stands head and shoulders above almost everything else that he did. The building consists of two primary elements. One is a sanctuary, and one was the school, and that reflects the fact that the building is the center of a religious community, the Swedenborgian community. Elements of it are clearly inspired by the work of the great American modernist Frank Lloyd Wright. The pastor at the time provided John Lingwood, the architect, with a summary of the symbolic geometries and the material symbolisms that were part of the Swedenborgian system.
Geoffrey Childs was very clear that he wanted to hire somebody who would be willing to work with him at getting the right mix of the stone and the wood and materials that we believe are symbolic and have a correspondential value. And somewhere in that process, I'm guessing when they talked to John, they felt they'd found the right guy.
Evangeline Gill, who was a secretary in the Lingwood office, And I'm sure that once she heard that there was the discussion of a new church being built, I can hear her voice, and I can even picture the type of enthusiasm that she had when communicating, saying, well, why don't you go to John Lingwood? He's doing all of these things. He's a wonderful architect. I can hear her saying all of those things.
And the building reflects a very, very clear dedication to material and associated meaning.
If you go into our church, you'll find the sanctuary is in a square. The sides are equal. And that again has to do with the symbolic balance. Wood is always a symbol for some sort of good. We think of wood as being softer, warmer, more gentle type of substance. And stone is a symbol for truth.
And in that sense, the building is attached deeply to architectural tradition, because in religious buildings this is very often the case. There is a sacred geometry involved. There are associations with materials, and there, of course, is the use of light, and especially colored light, as part of a religious environment, a kind of religious experience.
Architects have learned for centuries, good architects, that there are certain architectural qualities that draw forth an openness to what a space has to offer in terms of holiness.
Any building can be a church. Just so happens that that one is beautiful and designed as such.
If you're going to go to the effort of relocating and try and have the symbol of the church being the center, that you would want the church itself to be a beautiful structure.
John had to work with this square plan, and he developed what I consider to be one of the most extraordinary roofing solutions that I've ever seen. You know, that in fact the roof becomes the spire, and he does it in a couple of other churches, but it never works the way it does at Carmel New Church, because it turns out in Carmel New Church, from the outside, it looks almost like a kind of origami process where the spire grows directly out of the roof, but it grows towards the center of the building rather than defining one of its ends, either an entrance or over the altar. But it's so inventive, and it's so creative the way he does it, and the way he's used the timber elements on the inside of the building, and the way he frames the views into this spire in the inside of the building, which is a completely different experience from the outside of the building. I mean, you hardly can tell that it's the same building from inside and out.
When we talk about the sacred, we're talking about that which on the one hand connects us to everything and everyone, but which is paradoxically at the same time always beyond our grasp.
So they thought, wouldn't it be nice if we were in an area more rural, not in the busy city, find a place and go and actually try building a community around the church. They found this farm. This is the Evans farm originally, and he sold the farm to the church, and we ended up building the church in its current location. Got the name of Carindale as this little town, and built 64 homes around the church.
Our family has a long tradition of going to that school down there, but for circumstances and personal life, I didn't want to go down. It wasn't important to me at the time.
I originally told my mom I wasn't going to go. You know, going away at 15 is scary. I'm not going to lie. It's a different world across the country without your parents. It turned out to be a smart decision.
realizing that I got a lot out of it. It was life-changing in that, made me consider the religion a more important part of our life. And in the process, I had met Emmy, and we came back here, as I said, for the dedication of the new building, and wound up wanting to raise a family here. Being able to live in Carindale, and with the idea of one day raising our children in Carindale was, it was a big motivator. I wound up buying my dad's house that I grew up in, and just kind of raising a family there. So
it wasn't a hard decision for me. I knew this is what I wanted. We talked about it. Once we moved up here, I was very welcomed by everybody.
The custom in the church, going back probably to the late 1890s, has been, for example, to have what are called Friday suppers, all of which drew us more and more together. The more things you do together, the more you feel comfortable with one another.
It really is just spectacular here. And we've had plenty of new families who have moved in over the last year, and they can see that. And I've welcomed them because I'm on the welcoming committee, and said, if your kid ever wanders down the street, there's plenty of moms here who will watch out for them or send them back home or give you a call. You'll see my kid roaming the streets because I want them outside, and they're going to come knocking on your door and see if somebody can play. And that's a great thing about that. It just really just can bring you in as a family. It's fantastic.
In 1990, John Lingwood was in his late 60s. The business of architecture was changing and his career was winding down. This bank building on the corner of King and Francis Streets in downtown Kitchener was John's last major work in Waterloo region, but not his final work. His final work was an act of love. When his daughter Wendy and her husband Paul Gray decided to build their dream home on the shores of Lake Travis in Texas, they called on John.
He came with us to look at the property and sort of get an idea of what we wanted and start sketching. It was after he was retired.
Yeah, that was about the time that he retired. He came down and we took him over to the property, or to the house. We built a smaller house over there.
He would sit in different places and he'd say, okay, this vista is, and then he'd go on about what this was and how it needed to be situated. And he literally would wander around all the time.
Oh yeah. He would get in his car and he would drive around the property and find stones and rock. He'd put it in the trunk and he'd drive it up to where he thought we were going to put a walkway.
He passed away before it was completed, but everything was his idea. We had to have someone finalize, obviously, the actual drawings.
Years to build.
Yeah. Anyone ever came to our house just couldn't believe it. All of the ideas were his. I mean, it was really cool. He loved it. And it's just really a shame that he passed away so young.
When you're talking about home, in one sense what you're really talking about is belonging. Where is the place that I belong? Where is the place in my deepest self where I know who I am? For some people, that has a very deep connection to place. Be it a place that they call home, surrounded by their loved ones. For some people, it will be other places. It will be a place where they gather with a community of shared values and beliefs.
He was a lot deeper
than people knew.
Yeah.
He was always there for me. Just wonderful. A great father who really cared about his kids.
I think his salvation was work. He was so good at it and so talented that that's where he got all of his bennies from. And when that was gone, he was sad.
He was done.
He was very sad. He was done.